Hey everyone, it's Rachel Brennan at Hermiston Dubia Sales. We are going to teach you today how to put together a dubia bin for breeding or just housing your dubia roaches. This is a really big bin that I use for breeding. You can make a similar one but smaller if needed. So let's get right to it. So we're going to start out talking about the supplies. The first thing is the bin. It's a Sterilite bin. It's 27 gallon. It's 30.5 inches long by 20 and 5/8 inches wide and 15.25 inches high. I specifically use this type of bin because it works the best for me. I have regretted purchasing other bins in the past that were different sizes. So we're going to need our, in this case, bright yellow lid. It comes with lots of different colored lids. The lid color doesn't really matter. But like I said, I always use the exact same size bin because this works best for me. We're going to use 15 egg crates. I have 10 pieces of cardboard here that I'm going to use to separate those egg crates so that they don't fold in together tightly like they are here. And then I'm also going to use a 24-inch sunbeam heating pad that you can get off of Amazon. This is going to be our heat source. And we need a sharp knife of some sort. An X-Acto blade is also one that I use, or just a very sharp box cutter. We're also going to need some screen mesh for ventilation of the bin, and we're going to put that on the lid. We also need a soldering iron. This helps me put holes in the plastic pretty quickly and easily. And then we'll use 4-inch black zip ties to fix the mesh to the lid and for fixing the heating pad to the actual bin. All right, let's move on, get this done. So the first thing I'm going to do is go ahead and cut the holes in the lid. I basically just need 2 ventilation areas in the lid. It's not really precise. You don't have to measure it with a straight edge like I'm doing here if you don't want to, but I like things neat and tidy, so I went ahead and did that and cut those out with an X-Acto knife. Once I had cut both of those, I just tidied them up a little bit, and then we need to put the holes in it for affixing the mesh. So I use a soldering iron and just kind of spare stuff to wipe that plastic off. It kind of builds up if you don't have a thing to wipe it off. So I just am making basically little holes that each one of those is going to be kind of like a stitch, like a stitch for sewing, except for we're going to use zip ties as our stitches. I go through twice to clean that up, and also go ahead and tidy it up with just taking off the extra stuff. So when we get to the portion where we need to actually fix the mesh onto the lid, basically what we're doing is we're using each zip tie as a stitch, and I always put the untidy part of the stitches on the inside of the lid so that on the outside it looks good and tidy. That's just how I like to do it. So that's how it looks here. I use a pair of pliers to tighten them up really good. I also trim them off pretty tight, and sometimes I'll even use my soldering iron just to round off the edges because you can have some really sharp areas down there. And when you lift up the lid of your bin, you don't want to be cutting yourself or scraping yourself with the sharp edges of those zip ties that have been trimmed off. Here is the finished product. This is what the lid looks like when it's done. On the outside, it's kind of neat, tidy, and well ventilated. Your bugs aren't going to get out, and that is your ventilated lid. The next thing that we're going to do is get our heating pads set up. I actually was doing multiple bins at the same time, which is why I've got multiple heating pads laid out here. But basically, I put holes in the 2 corners of the end that is away from the power cord, and then I put 2 holes in the middle as well. So it's important to be thinking about how long your zip ties are when you put these holes in. You don't want to put them too far apart, because if you do, your zip tie may be too short to actually go all the way around it, and this will make more sense here in a minute when we pair this up with the actual bin. So after I've put the holes in the end of the heating pad, I then line up the heating pad on one end of the bin, and I use a pencil or something just to mark where my circles are. I remove the heating pad and I use my soldering iron to put those holes in the bin to match up with the holes that I just put in the heating pad. Once I have those holes matched up, I then use my 4-inch zip ties and I affix the actual heating pad to the end of the bin. And what I'm doing here is I'm setting it up so that one end of the bin is going to be warm, and then I'm going to tuck the other half of this heating pad underneath the end so that I have warmth underneath and at one end of the bin, and then the opposite side will be the cool end of the Dubia enclosure. So let's talk about the egg flats here for a minute. These egg flats are not the same on all 4 sides. They have 2 straight edges and then they have 2 scalloped edges. So the reason I bring this up is because we want to prevent our egg flats from tightly stacking together while they're in the bin. We need to have space for our Dubia to occupy, so we need to prevent them from stacking together like how they are when we get them in a big solid stack shipped to us, or however we get them. So if you alternate and you rotate and put a scalloped edge next to a straight edge on 2 adjacent egg flats, that's going to prevent them from stacking tightly together. So when I actually go to put the egg crates in the Dubia bin, I use this alternating egg flat sort of thing on the sides because there's a little bit of room there after I put the egg flats in, I guess, parallel. So that gives me 4 additional egg flats that I can fit in there, and I try to fit as many as I can because I want to be able to put as many breeding Dubia in this bin as possible. So this is how I set them up on the sides, and then I'll show you how I set them up in the middle. The way I put the bulk of the remaining egg flats into the bin is I put like sides together, and I always put the flat edge, not the scalloped edge, up because I'm going to be setting things on top of these and I want them to be relatively stable to hold those things. So I'm going to put one in, I'll put like sides together, either the rounded sides or what I call the pokey sides, and I'm going to put a piece of cardboard that I've cut in between those to make sure that those 2 pieces don't fold into each other. They don't, stack closely, that there's plenty of room between them. And I continue to do this throughout the entire Dubia enclosure, and I usually try to get it pretty snug because I'm going to put my water crystals on top and I really don't want them to spill. And so in order to do that, I need my egg flats to be pretty snug and tight in this particular enclosure. You don't have to do it like this. This is just the best way I've found to do it for me. Once my Dubia enclosure has been completed, I then am going to put something in the bottom of it. For example, I usually use a specific type of chicken feed that is low in protein, and I'm going to put that as their dry food. The way I keep their dry food separate from their wet water crystals is I put the water crystals on the top and I put the dry food on the bottom. And so the frass, which is basically their poop, is going to fall to the bottom as well. And so that's basically what I'm showing you here, is that if I took all those egg crates out, all that you would see would be the frass with dry food in it. So that's how I set that up. I then put the egg crates on top of that, and then I put the little water crystal dishes on top of the egg crates. And at that point you can put your Dubia in there, and in this particular size of enclosure I can usually put anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 adult breeding Dubia. So you can put more if they're smaller, and they tend to do pretty well. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and you have a good day.